Hey everybody, I wanted to give you an update on the anatomy research that I'm doing on the Orion Nebula. It seems like the more that I do, the more I'm surprised that I do believe it is a brain, actually, and we're going to go into that here in just a minute. What we're looking at right here is a document by R.A. Schwaller-de He's the guy who studied the Temple of Man in Egypt, and this is called The Symbol and the Symbolic, Ancient Egypt, Science, and the Evolution of Consciousness. I just wanted to read this one paragraph because I've found it to be one of the most important things that I've seen so far inside this document. And it says, the symbolic attitude of ancient knowledge cultivated the intellect to the extent of perceiving all of the phenomena of nature itself as a symbolic writing, revealing the forces and laws governing the energetic and even the spiritual aspects of our universe. Well, that's exactly what the Orion Nebula is doing. It's symbolic. And of course, if you're familiar with the ancient Egyptians and their temples and what they learned, R.A. Schwaller-de goes into great detail in the Temple of Man, which he wrote, and also this document that explains how they viewed the universe as a macrocosm and a microcosm man. And that basically means that from the largest things to the smallest things in the universe, we can interpret those as symbolic writing. If we know what we're looking at, that's the whole key. What we're looking at right in the Orion Nebula is we're looking at a whole brain. And I've found some interesting ways to show you a couple of parts that we're going to dig in today. And we're going to compare them against those various parts of the brains. We're going to look at the cerebellum. We're going to look at the pons in the midbrain, the pituitary, and we're going to take a look at the lateral ventricles and show you how those line up. Now, the important thing about all this is that it's important to understand that all of this stuff is proportional, and it is all fitting into exactly where it should be. That's extremely important. Because you can immediately see on the outside that what you're looking at, you can at least see the large vesica Pisces in there. That's your first clue. When you really start looking deep and you start looking hard into this thing, you can see how everything lines up and is proportional to the human body. That's extremely important. If it were all just different sizes, if it were all just various things or various shapes, it wouldn't work. And that's what makes this, if you were to run this through some kind of a probability calculator, actually astronomical. But we're not going to go into all of the parts, but I did want to show you a couple because I found a way to expose the cerebellum very nicely. And I wanted to show you the proportions of the, I've actually got a picture of some lateral ventricles that fit right under the corpus callosum, and I want to show you how that fits in there, and I want to show you where the pituitary is, and I want to show you where the midbrain is compared to the cerebellum and everything. So everything is just absolutely perfect here. So let me go ahead and get going with that. Now, I don't know if you all are familiar with the way an MRI works, but an MRI basically takes slices of the brain. It takes snapshots at different depth levels. And so when you look at this right here, I want you to notice the way it changes like that, because it's taking snapshots at different levels of the brain. Watch this one. The far side, and it's moving towards the middle now. You can see the cerebellum is getting larger. You're going to start seeing the corpus callosum here in just a second in the center. There it is. There's the ventricles. Here's the corpus. That's the ventricles, and there's the corpus callosum at the top there. So, and notice how you can see the cerebellum and stuff. Okay, so there's something very similar to what we're doing when we look at the Orion Nebula right here. It works kind of the same way, but differently. Since we can't take pictures of depth, what we do is we have all these mixtures of colors and we have levels. So what I basically do, see, I can see where certain things are. For example, if you remember that picture that I showed you with just to give you kind of a visual clue to start with. Okay, here's the overlay that I performed a while back. And so you can kind of see where everything fits in. And one of the things that we're going to get into today is going to be the cerebellum right here. We're going to take a look at the pons and the midbrain and the pituitary, and we're going to take a look at the ventricles. And so what I want you to notice here, how this kind of works like an MRI, is here's a good example on how I found the cerebellum really easily. You know, see, the cerebellum is sitting right on the back of the pons here and the midbrain, right? And one of the things that you might notice is that it has this dip right here that goes out. Well, in our version of the Orion Nebula that's been untouched, you'll notice that right in that very same area you have this right here, this dip that comes out. It's very exaggerated. You can see it right here. And this right here is your pons, and your pons right here, and your midbrain sitting up here. This cut that you see in here like this is the exact same thing that you're looking at when you look at that right here. You can see how that follows the same line. So the way that we expose this kind of stuff is to turn down the brightness or exaggerate the lighter spots and cut down the darker spots. So we're going to bring out the highlights, take down the shadows. And as you can see, the area that's cut into this right here is red, and the blue area is the area that we don't want to see as much. But you can already see that it exists there. What we want to do is get a really good idea of the shape of this thing, because it's actually there if you look at it. Notice the shape of the way the cerebellum looks. See how it comes up in an arc right here and it comes back down. Now, all cerebellums are going to be slightly a little bit different, but I want you to notice the general shape. It's shaped kind of like a large triangle, and it has a dip right in the side. So we should expect to see kind of the same thing here. And we can already see this dip right here. So when we expose this thing, what we should see is something that dips right here and comes up, back down, and then if you notice, it follows the same path as what you see right here, down at an angle. And this is how we're going to kind of expose this. So, okay, so I've selected the area that I expect to see the cerebellum in, right in this area, because this is our pons right here. So I should expect to see a cerebellum right in here somewhere when I expose this thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what I just said, and we're going to take the leveling out, and we're going to zoom in just a little bit. Trying to do this so you guys can see it here. Alright, and so we're going to start, we're going to find a dark spot here, anywhere, it doesn't matter. Alright. And it's starting to come out now. So as you can see, that dip that I was talking about and the shape of this thing as it comes up, back down, and back down here is shaped just like a cerebellum. And as you can see, it's sitting right on the back of the pons. Just to remind you how that looks. Here's a picture of one right here. You can see how the cerebellum, it comes out right here, which does the same thing right here. Here's our cerebellum that comes around right here. It comes back down like this, and it's sitting right on the back of the pons. As you see, it comes up, kind of almost looks like a bird's head up here. It does the same thing right here. You see that? And so what we have is we have the same structure of the cerebellum, the same dip that you see in it, the same leaf shape that you see sitting on the back of the pons, coming up just like this right here. Here's kind of a better picture right here showing the midbrain right here as compared to this right here. And then here's your cerebellum right here as compared to this large red leaf-shaped structure right here. So as you can see, we have these amazing parts of the brain here. So let's move to the next one. Okay, so what we're looking at right here, you're going to notice the similarities between what you see right here. This is the pituitary coming up, and then this is your optic nerve coming down right here. And what you see right here, this little blob, that's the pituitary, and you're going to notice where it is inside here on the overlay. And then also the optic nerve coming down right here. Okay, so let me show you where that is exactly. Okay, so this is the area selected that we're going to be working with right here. So let's go ahead and see what we've got here. So as you can see, that really exposes everything and brings everything out. Let's take a look at what we got. So what we have, this little area that you see right here, that is the pituitary, and it's divided up into the anterior and the posterior pituitary. And this area that you see right here is the optic nerve, or the optic chiasm. Here's the comparison to look at right here. You can see that the blob right here, which is the pituitary, is right on top of this little thing. And you can see that that is divided into two sections. A section here and a section here, coming from up here, as well as this being the optic chiasm. Right here is a picture of the pituitary. This brain is faced as if it were faced in the opposite direction, looking at it on the other side. This right here would be the anterior pituitary, and this would be the posterior. Notice that the anterior is larger than the posterior that you see right here. So this is the anterior and this is the posterior, and of course it's right in line with what we see as where it should be according to the optic chiasm. Alright, the next thing we're going to take a look at is going to be the lateral ventricles, which is what these are right here. In this image you'll see them right here, and you can see this middle thing right here. You can see how it dips down like that. Okay, and what these basically do is they fill with cerebrospinal fluid. And these are your anterior horns. And this right here, which is this triangular region, would be the same as this triangular region that you're seeing right here. So this is actually would actually be faced in the opposite direction. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this on top of what we're seeing right here, and we're going to see that since this is the corpus callosum right here, we're going to see how this falls right in line with what it's exactly supposed to look like. Okay, so we have a copy of the lateral ventricles right here. So we're just going to take that and we're going to place it right on top of where everything is and see if it lines up okay proportionally. Okay, so I've got it lined up here. I'm about to paste it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave enough opacity so that you can see both. So we'll just knock it down and just a little bit so you can see both areas. That should be good. Notice how the triangular region right here covers the trapezium area just perfectly. And notice that the arc of it comes around and ends right where it's supposed to. Let's get another look at this. We have the same thing where the lateral ventricles are right here. And you see the way the corpus callosum comes around? Well, it does the same thing right here. It comes around. Now, these ventricles are actually supposed to be tucked under the corpus callosum, but of course we put it on top of it so we can see the outline and the arc and the proportions of it and everything. As you can see, this the outline of this thing is pretty amazing. Let's go ahead and increase the opacity just a little bit so you can see it that way. And so that's what it looks like on it. Let's back out a little bit. So as you can see, looks exactly like it should and is the same proportions, same angle and everything. And I think that's really important. So let's do something real quick. Let's. I want to show you another picture of a brain that has ventricles in it. So here's a diagram of a brain that has ventricles that you can see, and as you notice, the ventricles are right here. They come down into that triangular region. This area that you see right above the ventricles, that's the corpus callosum, and that's what you see right here, traveling around just the top of this thing and then coming back around and seating right here, just like what you see right here, coming back around on top of the ventricles like that. This little red area coming back down on it would be the same as the corpus callosum doing that. And then also one other thing to remember too is that what you see right here, this little point, this little blob, what you see right here inside this diagram, zoom in a little bit, okay, so what is right under that is the pineal gland. As you can see, pineal gland, that's what's under it. And as we have seen so far, what is actually under this thing, and this is where it all becomes really neat and important, is that it's a vortex that's under there. And it's a matter of fact, NASA has already confirmed that that is what they call a black hole. And if you remember, I discovered that in these cathedrals in November of 2011. So this is what the Egyptians, when I was reading to you from R.A. Schwaller de Lubbock's about how the Egyptians saw things in nature regarding the spiritual and also the physical and things like that, we get an idea of what these things are. See, the pineal gland happens to be a vortex, and that's what we're seeing out there. Just to remind you, I've got this little area selected. I'm going to bring down the levels and show you that vortex that's right there. And that's what this is right here, this vortex. You see this looks like a disc and this little tornado, and then you have this this thing coming up with these spirals going around it. Well, that's exactly where the pineal gland is. Many of you are probably familiar with the winged disc, and if you've done any research across culture, you know that the winged disc is found all over the place. There's a lot of fear being spread unnecessarily about stuff like this and Anunnaki and stuff like that, just like people literalize things like the Bible and believe that there was really a snake or a serpent that talked to somebody and tempted him with an apple inside a garden. These are metaphors for visions that people had a long time ago, and the winged disc is one of these visions. One of the clues that gives this all away is, first of all, you're going to notice that this is a tree of life right here, okay? And at the top of the tree of life, you see this winged disc. Now, here's what's important to look at. You see these pine cones? These pine cones that they're showing, in other words, they're showing he's looking at the winged disc and he's holding a pine cone up to it. That means that logically, it would tell you, because we understand that the pine cone is a representation of the pineal gland, that the idea that these are being presented to, or it's almost like this is the same thing as a pineal gland. The winged disk seems to be that representation. Well, if we take a look inside the infrared version of the Orion Nebula, this is what we see. This is the original right here. And then what I did for your convenience is to show you this winged disk that sits right there, which basically is an infrared, almost a spiritual version of the pineal gland, showing it as this winged disk that sits right there. And this can only be viewed in the infrared version of the Orion Nebula. So that means that, and as we have seen in these cathedrals across Europe from the 1500s all the way up until 1750 or so, that people could also see the Orion Nebula visually when they reached higher states of consciousness in the infrared version. And the infrared version has archetypes such as the winged disk and the tetragrammaton and stuff like that. It's more of an archetypal, where the full color version shows you a physical version. The infrared shows you more of an archetypal, symbolic version, or almost a spiritual version of the same thing. And that's what I have come to find out. As you can see, the original, you can see if you run your eyes along this, I think this has worked really well for everybody on Facebook. They can really see it now. And I think that's important because that shows us spiritually that this area represents the pineal gland also. It represents a higher attainment of consciousness. And when we flip that back over to the visual version, what we actually see is we see pineal gland, because that's what it is. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will talk to you soon.